Hello, folks. Let's do it. Welcome to Dangerous Idea to the tens of thousands of you watching around the world. Thanks for being here. Let's get into the fact that this is day 150, 150 days of ongoing genocide against the Palestinian people, against Gaza, perpetrated by Israel with the loving support of the U.S. empire, Genocide Joe, and all the rest. But let's not pretend it's just Genocide Joe. It's the whole gang. Although, believe it or not, Kamala Harris has decided suddenly that she's going to try and separate herself by calling for a ceasefire, which she just did the other day. However, how much should we celebrate that? Oh, how long does it take you to not be okay with a genocide, Kamala? Oh, 150 days. Is that right? 150 fucking days of genocide. 149 was fine. But now she says there should be a ceasefire. She's not even saying don't genocide. She's just saying ceasefire for now, and then you can keep your genocide going later. 149 days of spineless cowardice. And now, oh, I see. Okay, you want it to maybe slow a little bit. On top of that, we have more protesters burning their uniforms, more veterans and active duty so-called service members in the U.S. military burning their uniforms in solidarity with Gaza to show that they are against genocide, that they do not want to be complicit in this. And if you need reminding, yes, the U.S. military, the U.S. government, the U.S. Pentagon, the U.S. empire is 100% complicit in this genocide. This video, by the way, coming from Columbus, Ohio. I believe it was. I know it was Ohio. Just can't remember if it was Columbus. Of service members burning their uniforms. The last one I brought you, I believe, was in Portland, Oregon. I know it. It might have been in LA, but I know it was Mike Preisner and others burning their uniforms in solidarity with Aaron Bushnell, but in solidarity with Gazans, with Palestinians, with a free Palestine. It is showing our military is not, a lot of our military is no longer behind this. And, I don't need to repeat to you all the ways that our military does help with this genocide in every way. Joe Biden, as you recall, while he was eating ice cream, said that we would see a ceasefire today. This was over a week ago, or roughly a week ago. Said as he was eating a ice cream cone like he's 6, because that's what you do. Have any of you had a 90 whatever year old grandparent? You walk them around, you feed them ice cream. That's what you do, and that's what they're doing with Joe Biden. You just say, hey, look, and you turn on the TV and whatever's on, you go, oh, it's your favorite, and they go, oh, it is, and then they eat the ice cream. That's what they were doing with Joe Biden. In the middle of that, he decided to say we would see a ceasefire today. Everything I've seen does not say that there is a ceasefire right now. It doesn't seem to exist yet. And so I don't know why they would put these statements out there if they didn't actually have any evidence that it was going to happen. But as we see here, 150 days of war on Gaza, Israel far from eliminating Hamas, which Israel pretends is their goal. Their real goal is genocide. Their real goal is ethnic cleansing. Their real goal is moving Palestinians almost entirely out of Gaza and the West Bank. But they pretend they're going after Hamas, even though they seem to kill almost no Hamas. Hamas's military wing, quote, has not even been minutely affected, says International Crisis Group analyst. So it is laughable. And on top of that, and I've told you this several times, that most of the bombs Israel is dropping are not bunker buster bombs that tear through the tunnels. Now, I don't know how much that would actually impact Hamas anyway, but most of the bombs Israel is dropping are just blowing up the buildings. And they know that Hamas is in the tunnels, many, many miles of tunnels underneath of Gaza. And they know Hamas is in the tunnels, and yet they're bombing these buildings anyway. Why? Because they want to kill the people. They want to see these people starve to death, which they are. We now have ongoing reports of people starving to death in Gaza. Of course, children and the infirmed are the first to succumb to starvation and disease and dehydration. And so that's what's happening. And it still took Kamala Harris 150 days to realize that was a bad thing. Um, and here is the U.S. This is getting. By the way, folks, in a few minutes, I have. I should let you know. I have former State Department official Matthew Ho, also former Marine. He had several tours of duty in Afghanistan and Iraq, but he notoriously or celebratoriously, is that a word? No, certainly not. Quit his job at the State Department in 2009 to protest the war, the surge in Afghanistan under Obama. And he's been excellent on the issues ever since. And I'm excited to have him on in just a few minutes. Anyway, let's talk about this ridiculous theater. Totally insane, totally Catch 22 Joseph Heller novel. For those of you who haven't read Catch 22, it takes place during World War II. It's a novel, but the idea is the paradox, the dark, tragic irony of war, where they want it to keep going, where they're sending people out to die just because they want their numbers to go up, where they're sending people on more and more missions just because it looks good for them as generals to have had more missions, even if it's achieving nothing, et cetera, et cetera. It's a lot of tragic irony, tragic paradox, tragic black comedy. But here's the thing. What's going on in Gaza is real. It's not a novel. And the U.S. is literally dropping bombs and dropping food at the same time on the Gazan people. This is totally, and my day job, my other job, whatever you want to call it, as a actual comedian, where no, most of what I say on this show is not comical, but as an actual comedian on a stage with a microphone, it makes my job impossible. I can't top this. I can't top a U.S. empire government dropping bombs and food at the same time. I can't even come up with a way to beat that level of dark comedy, of dark satire. The U.S. just carried out our first airdrop of food. The U.S. has carried out its first, this is from BBC, airdrop of humanitarian aid for Gaza with more than 30,000 meals parachuted in by 3 military planes. The operation, carried out jointly with Jordan's Air Force, was, I don't think that's Michael, but he does have an Air Force. He's got a lot of money, that guy. Jordan's Air Force was the first of many announced by President Joe Biden. The first U.S. airdrop comes as a top U.S. official said the framework of a deal for a 6-week ceasefire in Gaza was in place, but has not happened yet. The Biden administration official said on Saturday that Israel has more or less accepted the deal, although now if you read any other outlet other than U.S. propaganda and UK propaganda, it does not seem that Israel has accepted the deal. Anyway, they're dropping this food down to Gazans who are starving. So I'm not saying don't drop it, but I'm saying here's an idea. Maybe stop shipping bombs to Israel. Maybe stop sending them the materials to commit the genocide. On top of that, if you talk to anyone who understands the geopolitical machinations, the powers, the leverage, they will tell you that the U.S. could stop Israel from doing this immediately. Sure, Joe Biden acts a little frustrated with Netanyahu, but if the U.S. actually and meant it, if they actually said and meant it, that they were going to stop supporting Israel, not have their back, so to speak, as regional war breaks out, not have their back against Lebanon, not have their back against Iran or Syria. If the U.S. were to do that, then this would stop overnight, because Israel does not have the ability to sustain in a regional war without the U.S., without the U.S. sending tens of thousands of bombs, and without the U.S. being ready at a moment's notice. In fact, as I've brought you multiple times, The Intercept and other outlets have covered how the Pentagon sent out a memo to troops, U.S. troops in Iraq, to be ready to help Israel in the case of an invasion of Gaza. Basically, you're on notice. You might be needed to help invade Gaza. If all of that were legitimately cut off, I don't mean Joe Biden in a tottering speech going, we're not going to help Israel anymore. I mean, legitimately, this would all stop. But the U.S. has no interest in it. Thank you so much, Jay Blue, for the donation. I will do my best to read all of the super chats as they come in, or a little bit after they come in. You guys keep this show going. Honestly, you'll notice I don't have any big corporate sponsors. Wouldn't that be nice? Oh, any day now, the big corporations are going to decide they want to fund the guy who trashes big corporations. That is just any day now. But they could, the U.S. could stop this. The U.S. could bring about a ceasefire overnight, but the U.S. empire is not interested in that. The U.S. empire is, in fact, I think it's possible, and this is about as cynical as you can get, that the U.S. empire, and Israel's part of it, let's be honest, but views this a little bit as useful because it shows how morally bankrupt the U.S. empire is. They wouldn't call it that, but it shows that the U.S. and our quote unquote allies are willing to drop bombs on children day after day after day, and nothing will stop them. And in the minds of the sociopaths at the top of this system, at the top of this government, in their minds, that's a good thing because it shows to China that nothing will hold back the U.S. empire if push comes to shove. It shows to Russia that nothing will hold back the U.S. empire if push comes to shove. They don't want to show any weakness. And to them, having a moral compass, having a soul is a weakness. It gets in the way of threats such as we will send a nuclear strike at your country. And so in some sick way, they may actually view this as useful. But this is the height of just not being able to top black comedy, dark, just tragic comedy, dropping food and bombs. Because these are U.S., it's not just that the U.S. is shipping bombs to Israel. And we know that Biden and administration went around Congress multiple times to make sure to get the bombs there as quickly as possible, even though Congress would have voted for it anyway. I guess Biden just didn't want to wait a week, or his administration. Because it's not him. I mean, he's just focused on seeing if his underwear is on the facing the right direction. But I doubt he'd notice if it wasn't. But so he's gone around Congress to make sure to get tens of thousands. They just vetoed, what was it, a couple weeks ago or less than 2 weeks ago, vetoed the latest UN call for a ceasefire, even though everyone else except for the United States voted for it, except for the UK that abstained. But the US was the only no vote. And that's what the U.S. empire actually believes. Meanwhile, they drop food by parachute over Gaza because it's theater to make your average liberal in America, which, Joe Biden needs to win this election. Now, he doesn't, there is an easy argument to make that the Democrats don't care that much about the election because 90% of the structural systems in this government and in this country stay the same, whether it's Trump or Biden or Obama or Bush or Clinton or what have you in office. So, they fight for it, but do they fight that hard? Anyway, that's a side discussion. But they want the average liberal across America to think Joe Biden cares. And they're doing it right now with loaves of bread attached to parachutes. But he doesn't care. The administration doesn't care. The Congress doesn't care. The Pentagon doesn't actually care about humans in Gaza. If they did, they would stop this in a minute. This is just the height of sociopathic clowns dropping down food on starving people as they send more bombs to be dropped on those same people. It's just designed to make some Americans and some people around the world, I guess, think that they are somewhat moral. And they are not. I mean, like maybe just drop bombs that whistle a tune as they're falling. Maybe that would, because then the people that you're dropping them on would feel a little good. If it's, as it comes down, then you feel kind of good. I don't know that that's any less horrific or weird or bizarre or just disgusting than dropping food and bombs at the same time. It's just, I mean, they're worried about Biden's poll numbers really in this election because he just lost 15, 16% in Michigan to uncommitted, to a non-human. And those are Democrats who voted uncommitted. It really is just, Yeah. As I feel like I say once a day now, it's probably once a live stream now. I say I don't have words for this. I don't have goddamn words for this. Anyway, I want to get to our guest because I'm very excited to have him on here. Um, and so I'm going to do that. Please, everyone, hit thumbs up no matter what platform you're watching on. Please make sure to hit subscribe and share and all those good things. I will get to the super chats as much as I can. Thank you for supporting the show. You guys make this possible. And make sure when you click subscribe, you click the bell icon, but you probably won't get an alert anyway. So just show up 4 days a week. Just show up 3 p.m. noon Pacific. All right, let's get to someone who I'm proud to call a friend. He was in the Marines. He was in Iraq and Afghanistan multiple times. In 2009, he resigned from his position at the State Department in Afghanistan due to the escalation of the war under Obama. He has worked tirelessly to inform people about war and the U.S. empire and help veterans who have been traumatized. And I thought this now would be the perfect time to have him on to talk about Aaron Bushnell, but also so much more. And most of you know, Aaron Bushnell was the active duty service member who lit himself on fire, killed himself in front of the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. as a protest against genocide, against this genocide. And don't kid yourself by reading some of the mainstream outlets that said they're unsure as to what he was protesting. It was very clear what he was protesting. But anyway, please welcome Matthew Hill. Hello.
Hey Lee, how you doing?
Hey Matt, it's good to talk to you, even though not for a lighthearted topic, but I hope you're doing well otherwise.
Yeah. Thanks for having me back on. It's good to see you. I hope everything is well with you and the family.
Thank you so much. So yeah, I want to get to a bunch of things, but if you can start off by talking a little about Aaron Bushnell and what his actions say about U.S. military actions, but also I know you will want to talk about the mental health of our men and women in uniform in general around this issue.
Right, and thanks for the opportunity. There's a complexity to Aaron Bushnell's self-immolation, to his protest, to his resistance. There's certainly the obvious, the overt act that he wasn't going to be complicit, and he was going to do something that, in his mind, was going to matter, was going to make a difference. And I think many of us will say, because of the attention that has been galvanized by the emotion that has been just passed through our community, certainly was successful in that. But there's also other aspects of this too, which you alluded to, the moral injury that Aaron was going through. And so while I think we should be honoring what he did, we should be memorializing what he did, we should respect what he did, but we shouldn't be celebrating what he did, because he was suffering. We can see this not just from the fact that he chose this act of self-immolation, that he felt so frustrated, he felt so ashamed that this was the only thing he thought would matter, but because we've seen things that he had said prior to his self-immolation. In his will, he talks about how he doesn't want to do this act, but the machine demands blood. In other writings, you see him saying things along the lines of I can't get this blood off of my hands. Right. So he was in a tremendous amount of distress. He was suffering the very deep and the very eviscerating nature of moral injury, that guilt, that shame, that regret drives so many people to the point where the distress is just so severe. It's so all consuming. It is something that ending your life is the only way that you see the way out of. It's a psychological trauma. It's a distress that is probably has very few companions in terms of its severity. And we see this. And one of Aaron Bushnell's friends, Levy Pierpoint, wrote an op-ed in the Guardian newspaper just 2 days ago addressing this issue, that we see this issue of moral injury, in the American armed forces. You see it in all armed forces. You see it among all veteran communities. Doesn't matter what nationality, doesn't matter what war they were taking part in. It's something that exists. This idea of betrayal, whether you've personally betrayed your own ethical, moral, religious principles and beliefs and boundaries, or you've been betrayed, this can occur to, it has occurred to any subset of veterans anywhere in the world at any time in history. And so as was brought up in this op-ed by Aaron's friend in The Guardian, this idea that there are thousands of American service members suffering just as Aaron did because they went into the military, and you may describe them as Pollyannish or foolish or naive for doing so, but they went in thinking they had a white hat on. And what they realized during their time in the military was that they were wearing a black hat. And so for Aaron, that degree of guilt, that shame, this moral injury was something that helped propel him to this idea of protest through self-immolation, resistance through self-immolation, that this act. But we can't ignore the fact that he was suffering, and that based upon what he said, we have to also understand this as a way that he could find to atone, to repent, to cleanse himself through this self-violence. And that's why I say we should honor, we should respect, we should memorialize, we should utilize his action however we can to further our resistance to genocide and war and occupation. But we also have to remember he was suffering, and that he ultimately was a victim of this war, of the great and wide wreckage of this war. Aaron was one of its many victims.
So well said. And yeah, moral injury is a great way to put it. And yeah, he is definitely a victim of the U.S. empire, military industrial complex. And you got to a lot of this, that many people are celebrating what he said and what he wanted people to pay attention to in his act, in terms of free Palestine and ending genocide. But I guess it's mainly the right wing, maybe some liberals, but have been using it to say, oh, people are celebrating the fact that he killed himself. And I think one paper even quoted some tweet by me saying that I can't believe that he somehow succeeded in getting CNN to say genocide because CNN read his statement on the air.
Right.
And to me, there's a very distinct difference between celebrating what it was he stood for and what he wanted to say versus celebrating the tactic.
Right.
I've said many times, I don't think anyone should kill themselves. And in fact, if all the veterans who were contemplating it were to instead stand in front of the White House demanding an end to this genocide, I think that would be an incredibly powerful protest. So it's not about celebrating the end of his life.
Right.
And
we obviously, from what we know about him, rightly, we look at this kid and we say, my God, he obviously was very intelligent. He obviously was very passionate. What would he have done for his community? What would he have done for his family, his friends? What could he have done, if he was still with us? And that, of course, is one of the great horrors of war. There's a Marine from World War II named E.B. Sledge who writes about his time in the Pacific, fighting at Paelu and in Okinawa, and his catchphrase, if you will, right, was "What a waste," and it was just the great waste of it all, the great waste of these wars and this genocide that we're witnessing. Is what could have been, of course, is I think what touches a lot of us as we see, these images, these videos we witness, from 7,000 miles away, but we're witnessing the deaths of what, maybe 13,000 children now. Just right. I mean, so what might have been? It's a rather simple extrapolation or examination or thought. But it certainly is, I think, the most pressing for a lot of us in our desire to see this thing end. And I think what we're struck with so much, rightly, is this dissonance. How you could have a young man like Aaron who saw this and saw his complicity in it by being a part of the American Armed Forces and understood it. And it struck him to such a degree that he had to take action, and he self-immolated to try and stop it. And then we see our people in power, then we see our elected leaders, and we see the people in Congress, and we see the people in the White House, we see the people on CNN and Fox and MSNBC, and just how they're so unaffected by it, how they are just absolute psychopaths. There's no other way to describe them as other than psychopaths, because they're not just untouched by this slaughter, but they're willing to lie about it. They're willing to manipulate it. They're willing to say, this is not genocide, it's self-defense, right? So you compare and contrast, say, one member of the armed forces like Aaron Bushnell with another member of the armed forces like Admiral John Kirby, and the dissonance, that gulf is just massive. And it really shows who among us are our best people. And it's certainly not the people in Washington, D.C.
Do you want to give out to folks the GI rights hotline that I know you've been? I mean, I have it in my Twitter if you don't have it handy, but
yeah, I don't have it handy. God forbid,
I'll find it, and we'll yell it out.
Thanks, Lee. If you just Google GI rights hotline, it'll come right up. And also the Center for Conscience and War is another organization, and as well the Fellowship of Reconciliation. All three of those organizations, GI Rights Hotline, Center for Conscience and War, and Fellowship of Reconciliation, can help people who are in the military, who've come to this realization that I'm not wearing a white hat, I'm wearing a black hat. And it will provide, these folks are the experts on this. They will provide you with your advice, your options. They will help you through the process. And I'll say, if you or you know somebody who are in the military and you're looking to pursue conscience objector status, call these folks first. Call these folks first so that your rights within the military don't get abused. You don't get tripped up by this bureaucratic process that if you're in the military, you know what I'm talking about. Like, call these folks either at GI Rights Hotline, Fellowship of Reconciliation, or Center for Conscience and War, and they will help you, because there are options, right? There are things you can do, including speaking out publicly. Right. You can, as a member of the armed forces, speak out publicly. There's a way you can do it, but you can dissent publicly. You can write op-eds. You can appear on television as a member of the armed forces in a personal capacity. And there are no greater examples in this than Daniel Davis and Daniel Surgeson, Army officers who opposed the Afghan war publicly, high profilely. Danny Davis was on the cover of the New York Times in January of 2012, publicly opposing the Afghan war as a lieutenant colonel working on the joint staff. So, I mean, there are ways that you can publicly dissent if you are still in uniform. You just have to make sure you are doing it the right way so you don't get tripped up by the process and so that your rights don't get abused.
Thank you. Yeah, and now it's on the screen for everyone to see. For those listening to the podcast, it's 1-877-447-4487. And they're not, that hotline, they're not there to talk you into remaining in the military. They're there to help you out and tell you all your rights. So definitely very important there. And I know many of you may not be in the military, but you probably know someone who is. So maybe you can forward that phone number to them. I've been talking about this genocide just about every day on these live streams since day one, and we're at day 150. But I haven't gotten a military take on Israel's actions. Israel wants to claim that this is still some sort of war, that they're targeting Hamas. And I was wondering if you could speak to that.
Well, there's certainly, I don't think there's ever much doubt in what the outcome would be, as long as the Israelis were allowed to do what they wanted, and as long as they were resupplied in the manner that they have been. You know, every day, unless this has changed, I haven't seen it, but the numbers are that every day, 3 C-17s full of bombs, missiles, rockets, shells land in Israel from the U.S., resupplying the Israeli military. Every third or fourth day, a cargo ship shows up. Right? You've all seen how big those cargo ships are. It shows up in Israel and provides military support from the U.S. So as long as that was going to happen, the reality that we're witnessing, this complete destruction of Gaza, right? The destruction of everything there, all its infrastructure, its society, which is, as we know, right, is a key part of genocide. Genocide is just not about killing off the people. It's killing off their entire ecosystem. It's killing off their society. It's killing off any way to inhabit that land ever again. But also, it's also killing off who the people are. And so this is why the Israelis have been so insistent on destroying all the universities, right? On killing poets and professors and teachers, right? Make sure that the history of the people, who the people know themselves as, make sure that's destroyed, right? That's part of genocide.
Blowing up ancient mosques and
anything,
churches and cemeteries. Yeah.
Right. We can't even, Lee, it's so comprehensive, the destruction. We can't even remember it all. Right. I mean, we stumble over ourselves trying to remember all that the Israelis have done, let alone trying to order it and present it in a coherent manner, because it has just been so all encompassing. But the military assault in Gaza, I think, has gone the way I think most of us expected. If Hamas had hoped to bog Israel down and cause them humiliating losses, that really hasn't occurred. The Israelis have moved at their pace through Gaza, slowly, deliberately, methodically. They've lost a few hundred soldiers in the ground fighting, which is a lot for Israel over the last 20 some odd years, particularly since their evacuation or their retreat from Lebanon, the first part of the century. But the idea, though, that there was going to be anything other than this on a tactical military level, I mean, this is as Andy Basovich says, Ohio State playing Bowling Green. It's 63-7. What do you expect was going to happen? But of course, that's not the reality. That's not the wholeness. That's not the whole aspect of war. That's just a totality of it. And so you can say that Israel has had this tactical success. You can say it's an operational success in the sense of eradicating, destroying Gaza, making the land uninhabitable. In pursuing this path of ethnic cleansing. Yeah, they've been pretty successful with that so far. But on a strategic level, on a political level, how successful have they been? And that's what matters, right? Because if you are able to go and eradicate 2% of the population, chase as many as you can out of Gaza, make the land unhandleable, punish them, it doesn't do anything in terms of the strategic consequences. If anything, it's making things much worse for Israel. If anyone thinks that anything is going to come out of this other than a Hamas 2.0 or Hamas with a different name, that somehow this genocide, this collective punishment, this organized murder is going to do anything other than embolden Palestinian resistance towards Israeli occupation, I just don't know what to tell you. I mean, this is what's going to come from it. So the idea that long term, that this is somehow going to be better for Israel in terms of its security and stability, let alone economically and politically, as they continue to be isolated from the world. But Israel's whole card is that they have control of the American political system through the Israeli lobby. And that as long as they have the Americans, and in particular the world's reserve currency backing them, they can say to hell with the world. And if you watch the Israelis as they deal with the world, and if you did like I did, watch the Israeli ambassador at the UN today, this is essentially what they're doing. The Israeli ambassador today at the UN called the UN a bunch of people who are allying with terrorists and perverts and rapists, and he condemns the entire UN, essentially calls for its closure, its destruction. I mean, these are people who are setting up Fortress Israel to entrench themselves with the idea that as long as we have the U.S. behind us, we don't need anyone else. We can do whatever we want. We can withstand any degree of isolation from the world. And this is the best opportunity we're ever going to have to pursue this goal of greater Israel, this 120-year-old goal of greater Israel. So now's the opportune time to get it. But, again, the strategic and political consequences, I think they're far outweigh whatever type of short-term benefits Israel is getting, whether in terms of like the destruction of Gaza or this goal of greater Israel, which would include then the annexation of the West Bank and potentially what we're seeing from the Israelis, Lee, lots of commentary about going into Lebanon next. Right, this pushing of greater Israel up to, say, the Litani River, so about 20 miles into Lebanon or so. So the madmen who are orchestrating all this, the pursuit of of whether it's a militarist nationalism or a religious nationalism in Israel is bringing about things that could essentially doom Israel in 5, 10, 20 years time.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think Israel has destroyed any support they had from your average, your average kind of low information person who was not. They're like, oh, sure, I support Israel. Most of the world is now seeing this as a horrifying apartheid experiment at minimum. So yeah, it really does seem like they're dooming themselves, which is crazy because they seem to think that they're somehow winning by doing this. I guess last question. What do you, I never thought I'd see such a thing, but what do you think of the US now starting yesterday, dropping food down by parachute on the same people that were sending bombs to obliterate? It is straight out of a, catch-22 or something.
Right. It's absolutely obscene. It's absolutely obscene. And it's all political. This is meant so that particularly the Democratic Party over the next, few weeks, these last 5, 6 weeks of the primary season can say, look what we're doing, right? Just as we get Kamala Harris out this weekend saying, hey, we demand an immediate ceasefire. It's all for get the Democratic Party through this primary season. This airlift or the airdrop, 3 C-130s. A C-130 can hold 5 pallets. 5 pallets is equal to 1.25 trucks. So what you saw get dropped yesterday in Gaza, much of which, or some of which ended up in the water, supposedly, that you're talking about not even 4 truckloads of material food. That's all you're talking about. And so when you look and you can see on satellite images, Lee, right, the hundreds and hundreds of trucks lined up that Israel is not allowing in. And so when you understand it that way, that this was not even 4 trucks worth of food that was dropped, you really begin to understand just how cynical this was, just how much of a propaganda stunt this actually was, and begin to really get the idea of what are they trying to accomplish with this. While they're trying to buy time, they're trying to get through the primaries. There's no coincidence, that this 6-week ceasefire that the White House is advocating for, it matches up on the timeline with the remainder of the Democratic primaries. Right. And why are they hounding this now? They were on it before, but particularly last week after what happened in Michigan with 100,000 people going out, making the time and making the effort to go out and vote against Joe Biden. They are recognizing that there are real political costs to this. And this is something that people argued back in October. People were arguing this will cost you millions of progressive votes.
Yeah.
But the calculation was that millions of progressive votes are not as important to us as staying on the good side of the Israeli lobby. And that was the calculation. And now they're scrambling to try to do damage control. But I think behind the scenes, Lee, they're also saying to the Israelis, just get it over with. Get it done with. If you're going to do it, go and do it. We've got all the excuses. We'll blame Hamas for the negotiations not going through. Get it over and done with so that we get this monkey off our back. So I think that is actually what's the messaging going on, despite all the protestations from whatever spokesperson you hear in Washington, D.C. about how hard the words are behind closed doors, or how words matter, or whatever nonsense they say.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Matt. It's really great to speak to you again, and just thank you for all your work. What's the website I can give people to follow your work?
Yeah, so my organization's Eisenhower Media Network, and just Google Eisenhower Media Network, and then I'm on Twitter at Matthew P. Ho, P as in Patrick.
Thanks again, and be well.
All right, thanks, Lee.
Absolutely. All right, Matthew Ho, amazing voice, an important voice, and I hope you appreciated that interview. I now want to bring you this. It is a more in-depth and I don't know, important analysis of what the U.S. is doing with China right now, and why the U.S. really wants war with China right now or in the coming years. It's a level of detail that I didn't have before this, and trust me, you're gonna want to hear about this. All of that and more, it will be at rumble.com/Lee Camp. It's free to watch over there, rumble.com/Lee Camp. You can also get it on my locals page. So everybody locals, please stay tuned. And yeah, rumble.com/Lee Camp. Join me over there. Again, free to watch over there. Just go over there. It's the first live stream you'll see. It's titled something about dropping food and bombs. And even if you're not joining me over there, because I don't know why, like why would you not? Why would you not? You have to hear this. I have important information. As Alex Jones says, I have the documents. I've got the documents. So you have to join me over there. But if you're not going to, I hope you will still click subscribe and click the bell icon so you can find out about my videos. Although you probably still won't find out about my videos. So just show up 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. All right, let's get over to Rumble. Let's get ready to rumble. I really don't say that enough. I feel like when I do the switch